Number 10. Poison. Poison is an alternate version of Spider-Man who hails from the reality of Earth 70134. This reality comes from the What If comic, What If Spider-Man the Other? In it, Spider-Man ends up defeating as opposed to embracing his inner spider, which meant he remained within his cocoon under Brooklyn Bridge, unable to really fully resurrect. The Venom symbiote sensed that this had happened and left its current host racing to Peter's side in an attempt to once more bond with him. Mwahaha. While Peter attempted to internally fight off the Venom symbiote while in stasis, he was ultimately unsuccessful, and something new instead was born. This was Poison, an incomplete version of Peter Parker bonded more intensely with the Venom symbiote. This version of the hero returns home only to terrify MJ, who has been awaiting him for a long time. I don't know about you, but I say move over, finger guns, Peter Venom, and let's get Poison in the MCU. A villainous version of the hero and villain joined together that I think would be cool to have on the big screen, and especially to see face off against a team of heroic Spider alternates. Number 9. Spider-Man. One of my all-time favorite Spider-Man alternates is actually a female version of the character. We are talking about Aunt May as Spider-Man. She became an alternate version of the superhero in a What If, and from there went on to join the other Spider-Folks from across the multiverse in the fight against the Inheritors. We've also seen a few other stories involving Aunt May's spider-themed hero, who typically fights alongside her family unit, her husband Uncle Ben, and her nephew Peter Parker. Peter is the brains of the operation, whereas Ben provides the heart of the team, and of course May provides the strength and fighting prowess. I don't know about you, but I would just love to see a bunch of alternate Mays also show up in the MCU alongside some of these alternate villains, and of course probably alternate Spider-Men that we'll be getting. And Spider-Man is also technically one of those too, so that's a bonus. She's like alternate Aunt May and alternate Spider-Man. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to talk more about alternate spider folks that we would love to see in the MCU, because goodness knows there's a lot of them at this point, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Spider-Side. Spider-Side is one of Peter's evil clones. I say one of because, well, he's had a few over the years. Spider-Side was an alternate Spider-Man clone created by the villain Jackal. Jackal attempted to convince Spider-Side that he was the true Peter Parker, and it was later revealed that he was created to destroy Peter, Mary Jane, Ben Reilly, and Kane Parker. However, he failed in this mission. Spider-Side has powers similar to Peter Parker, being one of his clones, but he can also alter his body at the molecular level, shapeshifting somewhat, extending his limbs like Mr. Fantastic, and changing his density. He was also known initially for being more prone to violence. We have seen Spider-Man take on bad guys before on the big screen and in the MCU, but it would be pretty cool to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man take on an evil clone of himself. Clone Saga in the MCU, will it happen? Number 7. Spider-UK. Spider-UK is Billy Braddock. He hails from the alternate reality of Earth 833. His world was destroyed and he finds a new home with the Spider Army following the events of Spider-Verse. As he couldn't return to his universe, he ended up forming the Web Warriors, who claim the Inheritors' former homeworld, Loom World, for their base of operation. Spider-UK is a mashup of Captain Britain and Spider-Man from Earth 616. He ends up tragically dying during the events of Spider-Geddon and is mourned by the rest of the Spider Totems. RIP Spider-UK. Hopefully if we got the reality hopping Spider-UK in the MCU, he would fare a bit better. Number 6. Spider-Woman, aka Jessica Drew. I assume many of us would love Jessica Drew to somehow show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, considering how powerful and entertaining she is. Jessica Drew doesn't really have a direct relation to Spider-Man or the Spider-Verse at all when you think about it, other than she is also a spider-themed hero and therefore considered like a faded spider totem. But other than that, Jessica is really cool because while sharing the arachnid theme, she really is her own character. She became Spider-Woman after being experimented on as a child, or being cured as a child, depending on which origin you're more familiar with or you consider to be, more true for you as a reader and a fan of the character. She was given a serum that was made using spider DNA. As a child, she grew up mostly while in stasis and awoke a full-grown woman with spider-like powers and abilities. While Spider-Man is more well known for the thwip of his web shooters, Jessica is more well known for the powerful bzzzt of her mighty Venom Blast. Another unique and popular Spider-Man alternate also happens to possess a power that is actually very similar to this one. Can you guess which one that is? Little bit of trivia. Number 5. Mayday Parker. Another alternate version of Spider-Man that I'd love to see, and I think a lot of us would when it comes to live action Spider folks, is Mayday Parker. Now, there are a lot of ways the MCU could actually approach introducing this character. We could see her introduced via her being the daughter of maybe an MJ and Peter from an alternate world, or we could see her as being the daughter of Peter and MJ of Earth 199999, aka the MCU universe, but from an alternate future. Either could be really cool. May Parker is also just a really fun and interesting character to explore. She originally hails from the MC2 universe, the reality of Earth 982. In this universe, a lot of heroes retired, settled down, and had kids. May was basically one of those kids and also boasts of one of the longest running self-titled series set in that universe, with her series Spider-Girl, which actually ran for just over 100 issues. Like, wow, that's a lot of issues. I think it also ran for almost 20 years. It was like 1998? No, maybe not 20 years, but close to 10? Ran for a while. It was like 90s to early 2000s, which is impressive for it not being main continuity, I'm just saying. Number 4. The Cinematic Amazing Spider-Man. This is the Peter Parker who technically hails from the reality of Earth 120703, also known as the reality of the Amazing Spider-Man film series. This portrayal of live-action Spidey was played by Andrew Garfield. I always think of him as the coolest on-screen portrayal of the character, the coolest version of Pete with maybe the best hair? I don't know, let me know your vote for who you would think has the best hair of all of the live-action Spider-Men that we've had thus far. Of course, we all want and expect that Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man will make his way to the MCU. Why? Because we are opening up that multiverse, and the easiest alternatives to incorporate into live action are of course other live action alternatives like this version of Spider-Man himself. The question is, will we see any alternates of Gwen show up to possibly give Spider-Man a sense of closure? I think it would be really cool for his character to at least, get a say goodbye in person, even if it was just to an alternate version of that character. Number 3. Ghost Spider. Cue an alternate version of Gwen Stacy. How cool would it be to see Gwen make a comeback in the films but as a hero? Spider-Gwen, or as she's currently known, Ghost Spider. The Gwen Stacy of Earth 65 did not actually die. Instead, in this reality, Gwen receives the fateful spider bite and is transformed into a hero, while her good friend Peter Parker, who is often picked on, attempts to make himself like Spider-Girl, creating a formula that transforms him into the raging reptilian villain, the Lizard. In the fight against Lizard, Gwen accidentally kills Peter, not even knowing he was who she was really fighting. It's a different, possibly even more tragic version of that original story from Earth 616. Ghost Spider today is a fan favorite among Spider-Verse fans, and who knows, maybe she could join the MCU still played by Emma Stone, showing up as an alternate Gwen who would become a hero in the universe that she hails from. That could be interesting. Granted, I'd also be cool with seeing animated Spider-Gwen come into the MCU from Into the Spider-Verse. Either way, I just feel like it might be easier if everything's all live action, but I'll take any Spider-Gwen that you want to give me. Number 2. Miles Morales. One of the Spider-Mans that I think we most want to see in live action joining the MCU is Miles Morales. Heck, I feel like I'd even take an animated Miles being integrated into the MCU. That would also be super cool. Miles becomes Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe, following Peter Parker's seeming death and then later secret return, but kinda into retirement. Peter passes the torch on to Miles, who later, after the destruction of his universe, ends up coming to 616, thanks to the kindness he showed Molecule Man and the fact that Miles apparently was carrying around a burger in the pocket of his suit, which is kind of questionable but also kinda excellent. Ever since then, while originating from Earth 1610, he has remained a mainstay of Earth 616 and is known there simply as Spider-Man. Yeah, on Earth 616, we have a few Spider-Mans right now. Number 1. RAIMIVERSE Spider-Man. A version of Spider-Man that we most want in the MCU, at least that I most want in the MCU when it comes to Spider folks, and when we're talking about a cinematic multiverse standpoint, definitely has to be Tobey Maguire's version from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Honestly, I think this is the version people are most hyped to potentially see as we venture into the multiverse. I know I am really hyped to see this return. I mean, Andrew Garfield will also be cool to see, but I personally have a soft spot for Raimi's Spider-Verse. As weird as it got at the end there, I still am a fan of it. And anyways, it got weird through really no fault of Raimi's, or I don't think Tobey's, in terms of my understanding of that whole way that we wrap that up. Tobey Maguire for me was always a great casting choice, especially when it comes to his take on Peter Parker. I know I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing his somewhat shy yet determined take on the character character return in Spider-Man No Way Home. If that does happen, but I really think it's gonna happen.
And it's CHAMELEON. Being the first villain Spider-Man ever faced way back in Amazing Spider-Man #1 in 1963, I think we're due for a chameleon appearance in the MCU, and honestly, I think we could be getting it. With the build up to No Way Home on the horizon, with the movie planning to come out this Christmas, I have a sinking feeling that what we'll be seeing isn't exactly a multiverse of villains, but rather Chameleon taking on these other appearances. We've already had a theory of the chameleon being present in Far From Home, especially since John Watts revealed that it would be great for the chameleon to appear in Far From Home before settling on Mysterio, and with the insane technology being present in the MCU at this point, they could really do anything they wanted. So Chameleon really being the villain in No Way Home is certainly what I'm betting on. It would make people mad for sure, but it would be such a good twist. The only way I'm not going to believe it is until either after the movie's done or if we see two villains at the same time. In at 9, RHINO. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man #41 from 1966, the RHINO, otherwise known as Alexei Setsevic, underwent an experimental procedure that gave him an artificial skin and super strength. While not being the brightest or the sharpest tool in the shed, we have already seen a version of this character on the big screen during the final moments of the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which means that we may actually see him in the next Spider-Man MCU movie, if this actually does turn out to be the multiverse and not the chameleon. However, if we do end up seeing a true MCU version, I'd rather have one closer to the original or the Spider-Man Sony video game rather than the mechanized one we see in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just personal preference. Not everyone can have outstanding technology, right? Plus, the mech version is more along the lines of the Ultimate Universe, and after that whole Wanda Pietro thing, I'm staying well away from that. And at 8, Hobgoblin. Being introduced in Amazing Spider-Man #238 in 1983, the Hobgoblin was inspired by the work of Green Goblin and has been a moniker used by a few individuals, including the original Roderick Kingsley, followed by Jason McIndale during the late 80s and 90s, and after that Phil Urich. The character also made an appearance in the 1990s Spider-Man animated series and actually appeared before the Green Goblin made his debut in that show. With No Way Home introducing the Green Goblin to the MCU, and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin no less, the potential for someone to be inspired by him is present, and if Norman ends up leaving his glider behind, Hobgoblin would have an easy time either stealing it or acquiring it and using it for his own nefarious means. Hobgoblin honestly used to freak me out as a kid. I can't quite remember why, but either way I'd love to see an adaptation of this character appear in the MCU facing off against Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It would also give him his own unique goblin since Tobey already got the most iconic one. And it's 7, Spider-Side. Spider-Side is a more obscure and odd Spider-Man villain that I still think would make a great addition to the MCU. Being first introduced as Spider-Side in New Warriors #61, this version of Peter Parker is one of the clones made by Dr. Miles Warren, which is an entirely separate villain that could also appear, but I'm sure they would explain this away with someone remembering Mysterio revealing Peter's identity and then gaining a DNA sample. What's notable about Spider-Side, however, is not only him having all of Spider-Man's powers, but also the ability to stretch and warp his body at will, similar to Mr. Fantastic, which could be another way to introduce the Fantastic Four to the MCU as well. Spider-Side is also definitely deadly, helping Jackal to release a virus in Springfield, Pennsylvania, resulting in the deaths of over 2,600 people. Is it likely that this character will appear in the MCU? No. But would I love to see it? Absolutely. And at 6, Morbius. Michael Morbius will be getting his own movie in 2022. However, it is not planned to be a part of the MCU, rather a part of the SSU, Sony's Spider-Man universe, along with Venom, Venom Let There Be Carnage, and KRAVEN the Hunter. First introduced in Amazing Spider-Man #101 in 1971, Dr. Michael Morbius was a scientist born in Greece who became a Nobel Prize winning biochemist. He was suffering from a blood disease and developed an experimental treatment in an effort to cure it. Its side effects though turned him into vampire Jason, who ended up needing to consume blood in order to survive and gain typical vampire characteristics such as aversion to sunlight and the powers of flight, enhanced strength, speed, and a healing factor. His overall appearance also changed as well. He gained fangs, his nose flattened to appear more like a bat, and his skin became extremely pale like me but with less of a nose and sharper teeth. Additionally, the victims of his bite would turn into living vampires themselves, which is absolutely crazy. This character also made an appearance in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, however it was a kids show so he had to consume plasma instead of blood, and his origin was changed as well when he spliced his DNA with Peter Parker's using the neurogenic recombinator and a bat jumped in front of the ray. Would I like to see him in the MCU? Of course, he's an iconic villain, but I don't know if Sony is gonna let go of the leash that they have around the other Spider-Man characters considering how well Spider-Man's doing in the MCU and they ain't making enough profit from it. Just saying. Halfway through into number 5, Kingpin. Wilson Fisk. First appearing in The Amazing Spider-Man number 50 in 1967, Wilson Grant Fisk is a wealthy entrepreneur and philanthropist by day, but secretly is a criminal mastermind running nearly all of New York's underground activities. The character has been adapted into multiple different media, including video games, TV, movies, and cartoons as well. But could the character be coming to the MCU? It's possible, with fans speculating the introduction of Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil, as Peter's lawyer in No Way Home. Both characters the Kingpin is associated with will be in the MCU, and considering the magnitude of that and his existence in the Daredevil Netflix series, it's certainly possible we get Wilson Fisk on the big screen. The reason people believe Matt Murdock to be in this movie is thanks to a slight differentiation in the leaked trailer versus the official one. In the scene where the files are slammed onto the desk, in the leaked trailer we can see this man's face. However, in the official one his face is out of frame. This seems to indicate the desire to keep his character secret, but is this the case, or is Marvel just pulling a double bluff? I guess we'll have to wait until Christmas to find out. In at 4, Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter is one of Spider-Man's earlier villains, appearing first in The Amazing Spider-Man number 15 from 1964. Since then, Kraven has endured as one of the web-slinger's most formidable foes, and is part of the collective of adversaries that make up Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Kraven has since come into conflict with other heroes as well, such as the Black Panther. He is also the half-brother of the Chameleon, and is one of the founding members of the Sinister Six. With the potential of Chameleon being introduced in No Way Home, we also have to consider Kraven's likelihood of appearing, especially considering how he's getting his own movie in the Sony Spider-Man universe, which means if the two universes ever merge or cross over due to some other spell gone wrong, the character will surely make an appearance or at least be confirmed, even if he's not on screen, because he'll be in that universe. Kraven is one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains and is one that I see as a recurring request by fans. I certainly think that there are more interesting characters that could be used instead, but I'd still be happy to see him in the MCU. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Spider-Carnage. Spider-Carnage is my favorite alternate version of Spider-Man. Being introduced in the Spider-Man animated series from the 1990s, this version of Peter Parker shared most of his early life with the superior counterpart. However, the difference between the two was Aunt May at some point died as well, being buried next to Uncle Ben. But thanks to some messing around with interdimensional portals by Jonathan Owen, a version of the Carnage symbiote sensed this Peter's anger and combined with him, turning him into Spider-Carnage, a villain set on revenge and the destruction of all realities. Man after my own heart. This character would require symbiotes to be introduced, but oh my god would I love to see this character on the big screen. Even if he only appeared in the final few episodes, Spider-Carnage is one of the coolest iterations of Spider-Man to date in my opinion, and is part of the reason why I love the 90s cartoon so much. Seeing this on screen would be a dream come true for me, and while it may not be possible, I want it so bad. I also want a pop figure of this character, because that would be sick. Penultimately, in at number 2, symbiotes. On a more general note, symbiotes in the MCU would also be incredible. While they are mostly, I'm sure, going to be limited to the SSU, they would be required to see Spider-Carnage or any other really insane versions of characters, like Red Goblin or even Venomized anything. Even if it's not Venom or Carnage, someone like Scream, Toxin, or even Anti-Venom would make an amazing addition in my opinion. The first appearances of a symbiote occurs in The Amazing Spider-Man number 252, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 90, and Marvel Team-Up number 141, all of which released concurrently in May of 1984, in which Spider-Man brings a symbiote home to Earth after the Secret Wars. Secret Wars number 8, which was released months later, actually details how he got the symbiote. The concept was created by a Marvel Comics reader, with the publisher purchasing the idea for $220. The original design was then modified by Mike Zeck, becoming the Venom symbiote. The concept would then be explored and used throughout multiple storylines, spin-off comics, and derivative projects. Imagine pitching something as big as that and being paid $220 for it. Well, okay, adjusting for inflation, that would be $516 now, which isn't bad honestly, but for a character like Venom, is absolutely abysmal. Finally, in at number 1, MORLUN. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2 number 30 in 2001, MORLUN would be an incredible addition to the MCU, especially if they want to continue in the Spider-Verse sort of direction they appear to be starting in No Way Home. MORLUN is potentially the biggest threat Spider-Man has ever faced, requiring a whole multiverse of spider people, or as they're referred to in the comics, spider totems, to take him down. Coming from Earth 001, MORLUN uses these spider totems to stay alive, feeding on their energy and casually jumping from universe to universe to just squash their spider person like a bug. This guy is the backbone of the Spider-Verse concept, since a load of spider totems had to team up in order to take him down, but not without massive casualties. If they ever want a whole Avengers Avengers movie with just spider people, this would be the way to go.
Number 10. Harry Osborn. This one's a dead friend. One of Peter's closest friends is Harry Osborn in the comics. Well, he is at least until he turns into a villain himself. Harry ends up dying at the end of Spider-Man 3, sacrificing himself to save Peter and inevitably redeeming himself. Peter forgives Harry for all that he has done, and he and Mary Jane kind of reluctantly get back together and attend Harry's funeral, mourning their former good friend and at one point, kind of villain. I mean, definitely villain. Harry in the RAIMIVERSE is played by James Franco, but Dane DeHaan plays the character in the Amazing Spider-Man series. Dane DeHaan's Harry Osborn becomes Green Goblin in the second film and is a secondary antagonist, in a film that, like Spider-Man 3, suffered from too many antagonists. I'm just saying. I don't think we'll be seeing James Franco reprise the role in the MCU for reasons, but there is still a chance that Dane DeHaan could reprise the role. I would be fine with that. I would be interested in seeing more Harry Osborn. I would be interested in seeing more Harry Osborn in some capacity in these movies, as long as we don't bring back Spider-Man's costume from the Amazing Spider-Man. I forgot how much I disliked that costume. I went back to those movies for this list and I was like, man, still don't like that costume. It's not for me. Number 9. Uncle Ben. Cliff Robertson, who originally played Uncle Ben, sadly passed away back in 2011, but we could still bring this character back. Martin Sheen is still alive and well, who played the character in the Amazing Spider-Man series, or there is a chance we can meet a new version of Uncle Ben from the past before he died in the current Spider-Man film series. After all, I mean, we never got to meet Tom Holland's Uncle Ben, if he ever had an Uncle Ben, although he's still Peter Parker, so while it goes unmentioned pretty much, we can assume he does, I think. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want another list where I talk about more alternate characters in the Spider-Man universe, or just alternate Aunt Mays, because that would also be cool, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Flash Thompson. Well, we have an excellent Flash Thompson currently in the MCU with Tony Revolori, who does a great job of balancing his hatred for Peter Parker with his love of Spider-Man. There have been a few portrayals of the character that have come before him, so it's possible we could get a whole team of Flashes in the MCU, if they all decided to show up from the multiverse. It all started with Joe Manganiello, who played Flash Thompson, school bully and original boyfriend of Mary Jane Watson in the RAIMIVERSE. Also, fun fact, this was Manganiello's breakout role. I completely forgot about this until revisiting the films, and wow, I just think that's such a weirdly perfect casting for Flash Thompson. Following up Joe was Chris Zilka, who played the bully turned sensitive wannabe friend to Peter Parker in the Amazing Spider-Man series. I also really like Chris's portrayal of the Flash, so I'd also be cool with him showing up as well. Give me all of the Flashes. Number 7. Genki Lee. Another character that shows up in Into the Spider-Verse is Genki Lee, and this is definitely a character I would love to see also show up in the MCU, along with Miles of course. I don't think you can have Genki without Miles. In Into the Spider-Verse, Genki was not portrayed as being quite as close as he is to Miles in the comics, and that is part of the reason that I want to see these two pals together in the MCU. I want to see that awesome BFF connection. In the comics, Genki is Miles' best friend, who knows about his secret identity as Spider-Man. He hails from the alternate Earth of 1610, the Ultimate Universe, just like Miles. Hopefully where Miles goes, Genki will too, and hopefully that place that they're both headed is the MCU. Number 6. Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy is well known in the comics for being Peter's first ever love, and for many fans, his one true love. Personally, I'm a big shipper of Peter and MJ together, but you know, Peter and Gwen are still iconic and have a lot in common, and I respect that. In the Amazing Spider-Man series, Gwen Stacy was played by Emma Stone, who I absolutely love. Unfortunately, just like in the comics, Peter was unable to save Gwen at the end of the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and she died. Peter thought he had saved her, but learned that ultimately he was too late. He gave up being Spider-Man, but eventually returned to the mantle after listening to Gwen's valedictorian speech, which inspired him to become a hero once more. Emma Stone did an awesome job playing Gwen, and it would be really awesome to see her return, and to see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man get to actually say goodbye to some version of her from the past or alternate future. Alternatively, I also wouldn't mind seeing Bryce Dallas Howard return to the role of Gwen, as she also played the character in the 2007 film Spider-Man 3. And I also just love Bryce Dallas Howard. She has done so much since then and has proven herself an amazing performer and an amazing director. Number 5. Spider-Gwen. aka Ghost Spider. Of course, this character doesn't come to us from any of the cinematic realities. Well, I mean, she is in Into the Spider-Verse, which is a film, so it is cinematic, but it is animated, so yeah. Either way, we can still get a live-action MCU version of Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, as she's known currently in the comics. How cool would that be? Perhaps even someone who has played her before would be up for suiting up and rising to the challenge to take on Gwen as a superhero. Or perhaps we could even see a new performer take on the role and show up as a new character in the MCU, but a familiar character for those fans of Into the Spider-Verse or of the comics. Number 4. MJ. Alternate MJ in this sense. For this one, I am talking about the return of the great Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson, Peter's next door neighbor, high school crush, and true love. I love Zendaya as MJ, but that doesn't mean we can't have some alternates show up as well when the multiverse starts to open up, and I think that is where we're headed here. If that happens, then we could all of the sudden be seeing different MJs appearing. Who knows, maybe we'll even see Shailene Woodley's performance, as she apparently had her portrayal of the character cut from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Number 3. Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock appears in 2004 in the second Spider-Man film to come out of the RAIMIVERSE, Spider-Man 2. There he was played by Alfred Molina. Although we haven't gotten the film yet, Molina appears to be reprising the role of Doc Ock and will appear in the MCU in Spider-Man No Way Home. He's spotted in the trailer, and aside from that, he has been rumored to be making a return almost since day one with this movie. Molina did himself confirm his return in an interview with Variety, and Zendaya, who plays MJ in the MCU, has also confirmed his return in an interview. We'll have to wait to see him show up in the MCU and see on what level he's returning. Will he still be a villain, and how did he escape the river he supposedly drowns in at the end of Spider-Man 2? Number 2. Venom. With the post-credits scene from Venom Let There Be Carnage, this is a character that many of us expect to see in Spider-Man No Way Home, or at least somewhere in the MCU. Although to be fair, Spider-Man really makes the most sense here when we're talking about when and where this character would be expected to show up. Tom Hardy's Venom is a bit of a hot mess, which is also why I cannot wait to see what will happen if we get both him and Tom Holland's Spider-Man together on the same screen. Venom, of course, does seem to break through to a world where Spider-Man's identity has just been revealed by the Daily Bugle. We even see Tom Holland's face on the TV screen when we see that reveal, so it seems very likely that these two will be meeting up again somewhere in the MCU. Hopefully Venom doesn't lick Spider-Man when they do meet up, because I'm not ready for those weird fanships. Number 1. Norman Osborn. Obviously, Willem Dafoe's version of Green Goblin is still something all of us remember with extreme fondness. No matter how you feel about the Raimiverse, you probably still love Willem Dafoe and his portrayal of Norman Osborn. Will Norman be coming to the MCU? It seems super likely just based on all the teases that we've gotten. Will he be played by Willem Dafoe? It's what many of us are expecting as the multiverse gets cracked wide open, likely as a result of Doctor Strange's spell backfiring, possibly because he was so distracted by Peter's constant rechanging of the parameters of that spell he was attempting to cast, which would of course warp reality. Green Goblin is one of the most iconic Spider-Man villains out there, if not the most iconic. I would say the most iconic, but some people might disagree. So it'd be really awesome to see him return in the current film franchise.